Welcome to So You Think You Can Write, where we give serious writing critique without taking ourselves too seriously. My name is Lindsay, and with me here today is
Janette, Rallison,
Melinda Carroll.
Brock Booher, and this episode is sponsored by WritersClearinghouse.com. Visit writersch.com and look at their services. They offer some great things, and we're glad they're our sponsor.
That's right. Yeah, they're giving you said all the prizes, yeah, so some great prizes, so check them out, definitely. All right, so you should know how this show works, but I'm going to explain it anyways. Brock is going to read today. First page submission, the rest of us are going to pretend that we're agents and editors, and if we reach a point where we would stop reading the manuscript, we're going to hit the button and then explain why.
Okay.
Take it away, Brock.
All right. Man, all right. That's
Okay,
two words
so-
or one word? No.
Yeah. Okay, so because we're going to have it up on the screen here, you may notice that this page is 2 paragraphs. So
Randy
if
buzzed
I'm-
it before we even started writing.
that's right, because if I was an agent, I wouldn't even read it. It's 2 huge paragraphs, and that is just way too much, and I would be afraid that the pacing on the whole book would be slow, because that's what large paragraphs does. It slows the pacing.
Okay, so
Oh,
first
wow.
buzz right off the bat, and so I'll start reading.
but he is right.
Yeah,
Okay.
he is right. But here we go. Of Willows and Lies is the title. Johnny sat alone, desperately trying to convince himself of one last lie. The car sat idling atop the peak of Hadley Road, grumbling in the cold at either the late hour or its indecisive passenger. Perhaps it was both. Falling snowflakes, hidden by the black of night, burst into small balls of light as they drifted before the car's headlights, flaring from darkness as if they'd existed until the moment the light thrust them into being. The hypnotic movement was almost romantic, as though each snowflake deadened the bustle of the world and slowed life just enough to almost catch a glimpse of it passing by. Johnny paid no attention to the snowflake fireworks.
Right, he obviously paid attention to him because we just spent a lot of time talking about snowflakes. And is Johnny really thinking about the snowflakes? He's not. Well, you just told us he's not. Then it's not in his point of view if you're putting in, all of the hypnotic movement was almost romantic, as though each snowflake deadened the bustle of the world and slowed life just enough to almost catch a glimpse of it passing by. First of all, that's a really long sentence. But it's like this romantic, poetic way of talking about snowflakes. Don't put that in there unless your character is thinking those thoughts. Otherwise, it's the author stepping in to give us some description. And then it makes no
Otherwise
sense.
known as author intrusion.
Yeah, and then it makes no sense when you're like, but he didn't notice that. But if it's not important to the story, then don't put it in. I mean, I like the first part about the snowflakes, but then get on to what, this seems like a high tension moment, one last lie. I want to know about that, not snowflakes. Yeah.
Okay. His mind was too tormented by his choices to notice the natural beauty in front of him. There was no wind outside. That's why Johnny chose that day. There were no other cars coming or going. That's why he chose that time and place. The ice and packed snow on the road glimmered slightly in front of the headlights. The ice is why he chose that season. He stared down the long road ahead of him, knowing of, but not seeing, the lake just beyond the sharp bend. The speeding car would have no trouble missing the turn. The lake was large enough to warrant a name, though Johnny didn't know it, and only a patch of cattails stood between him and the road.
Thank you.
Telling us again what Johnny doesn't know.
Yeah.
You can only tell us what Johnny knows. Put us in Johnny's mind. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I will speak for you.
Well, all of those things are true. I think you're trying to describe the setting, and you're describing it very well, but you are really taking us out of Johnny's viewpoint, and all of the tension is in his viewpoint. He is the one with that conflict at the very beginning where he's sitting alone, desperately trying to convince himself of one last lie. And then you don't refer to the lie anymore, except that there's anxiety going on, but it's all on setting. So you really have to kind of put yourself in Johnny's head and think, what would he be noticing right now? What would he, and there are some details. you know, he chose the day because there was no wind. He chose that time and place because the ice packed snow on the road glimmered slightly in front of the headlights. I didn't really like that repetition. I didn't feel like it worked very well. But at least you're kind of somewhat in his viewpoint there. But again, it's not really tapping into the tension of what's going on inside of his mind.
Because we still don't know.
Yeah, I think what's about to happen is he's set up something, a car crash, so he's waiting for the car to come and crash.
But it could be anything. It could be he's going to ask a girl to prom.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know how to
You're
really
right.
feel about
He's
it.
getting ready to kill
That'd be
himself.
horrible. Don't ask a girl
That is
to
what
go
he's.
wrong.
I promise you,
You
he's
think
anyway.
getting ready?
Yep, he's
Ross
getting ready to kill
thinks
himself.
suicide.
And I didn't even read ahead, but I'm about
Melinda
to. So let
thinks
me finish.
Oh, yeah.
I'll go ahead and finish.
Okay,
Let me finish.
Okay.
But that's what he's about to
Think
do.
I was thinking.
It
well,
was-
I was just thinking it could be anything.
Yeah.
It was late enough in the winter.
Okay.
Sorry, I think about suicide occasionally, so I guess, you know. It was late enough in the winter that the water was now frozen solid around the shallow edges of the lake, yet precariously thin just a few yards in. The car was able to slide out into the deeper water before shattering the ice and finding its way into his liquid tomb. All was set. All was ready. Johnny only had to place his foot on the gas pedal. The conditions for his suicide were perfect, and Johnny decided that was the day he would die. I need to die, Johnny reiterated to himself for his bazillionth time. Some lies are easy to believe once they have been repeated enough, but some lies can be too big to fully convince one's heart. So Johnny repeated it for the bazillionth and one time. I need to die. Now, if you took that paragraph and you moved it up to the top, you'd have a good start, or possibly a good start.
Although I will say, so what you're setting up here is a character who knows he doesn't really need to die, and who's trying to convince himself that he's supposed to die. Like a suicidal character really believes even if as the reader you know it's a lie, and as the author you know that it's a lie, if you're in the viewpoint's character and he's contemplating suicide,
They're convinced there is no hope.
they don't think it's a lie. So I think unless that's part of what you're doing is you're trying to tell us that this character knows he's not supposed to do this.
Right.
Then
Yeah, when I heard that, that he was trying to convince himself, I immediately think, oh, there's somebody else who's telling him
Yeah.
you need to die.
yes.
And he doesn't really believe it, but he's maybe going to go along with this. But and I don't know if that's the case or not, but that's also what I thought of.
So I agree with Randy. The paragraphs are too long. It's Faulkner-esque. I had a writing teacher who said that they used to go before they would read Faulkner and take some ibuprofen because they knew they were going to get a headache reading it. And then after a few years thought to themselves, why am I doing this? And so they quit reading Faulkner. So that you got to understand that there's some beautiful description in here and some very poetic, writing in here, but it just doesn't work. It's like it's overwritten. It's the wrong genre. Maybe this is meant to be literary. I'm not sure, but it has the tension of a contemporary, but some of the literary writing of a literary piece, and so you may have to decide which type of piece you're writing and how to market that once you do. But even then, it's kind of in between. It hasn't figured itself out, and so there's some work that needs to be done on that. So.
Well, are we gonna vote, or do we have anything else to say? I mean, good tension. You're starting off in a tense place where he's, contemplating suicide. So that's really high tension. Although, it also depends on where the story is gonna go. Because the problem with starting with something super high tension like this is, where is it going to go? Like, everything after this is gonna be probably lower tension. But without knowing much about the story or the story goals.
Then it needs a stronger story if it's going to be lower tension than this. The decision to commit suicide should just be, a prelude to the rest of the story, in which all these problems that have forced him to that point. I would start, and here's my suggestion. So I would start with the conditions for Johnny's suicide were perfect that day. That's a great opening line. it hooks us, it sets it up. I would round out that first sentence, the paragraph of that first sentence with a few, the descriptions, lovely descriptions here. Talking about it being winter, icy, the ice, the car will be able to go in and sink and he'll be dead. But we don't have why he wants to die or thinks he needs to die. And other than it's winter and there's a car, we don't really have setting. We don't have a hint for genre, and we don't have a story goal. I mean, all those things are really important on our first page, and we're missing all of them. What we have is a great hook and some lovely writing and description, and that is not enough to sell an agent on a story.
So I just read a book where the girl the girl commits suicide in the first chapter, similar to this.
Death on page 1.
Yes, and then the rest of the book is her family discovering why. Kind of this girl that who we thought was this is actually this. And so the whole rest of the book was, the tension was there because, and it was deliberately not included. Why they committed suicide was deliberately not included because that was the point of the story.
That was the mystery of the story.
Yes, was to ask why would she do this, and so you have the chapter of her doing that, and the next chapter is the family before they know, and it's this happy family, and they have these assumptions about her, and then there's kind of an unraveling of that over time. So you can still do that, but I agree, this still isn't in the viewpoint that you're starting. That was a great, I agree with that tip. I think that's a great way to start this. But just, if you are deliberately not revealing why, you still have to be in his viewpoint. You still have to kind of show some of the torment of what's going on.
Keep it in his viewpoint. I think that's the biggest thing is that you only describe what Johnny would see and think about while this is happening. And if he's thinking of suicide and he's seeing snow, maybe he sees that as like frozen and cold and like death, or something. I mean, he wouldn't be thinking about it in poetic terms. So just put us in his mind and write it as if he is dictating it to somebody, not as though an author is telling us about what he is thinking and not seeing
maybe
it.
try rewriting this in first person to see what comes from that.
Yeah. But I liked the first line. I know the other people didn't, but I thought it was a good first line.
If it is a lie, if he really believes that he shouldn't believe it.
Yeah. Again, and I'm assuming somebody else or something else is forcing him to do something he doesn't want to do.
Your comment about what do they think, and the people who commit suicide or try to commit suicide think there is no other option. They really believe there is no other option. So there are maybe you'd almost have to make it logical, have to have some outward influence that's forcing this course of action.
Yeah.
So anyway, shall we vote? Randy, you want to start?
I will. I am going to give this a right. For all the reasons I've already said, and you can't have two huge paragraphs on the first page and expect an agent or editor to actually continue reading on it.
Yeah.
So it's a right for me.
Yeah, and I don't usually count how many sentences I have in a paragraph, but I once had another author say, don't have more than 5 sentences in a paragraph. And that's probably good advice. You can always break them up. I'm going to give this a right also, just because, for me it was the keeping us in Johnny's head. I think you need to do that.
Me too. I'm going to say right, and I think we've kind of been over all of the reasons, but kind of those same
The
reasons.
13 reasons why.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Death jokes. We are so insensitive. I feel like, please.
Really, if they're going to commit suicide,
No, they're
believe
not.
it.
We have hope that Johnny's going to pull himself out of this.
Yes, we do. And I'm going to also give it a right for the reasons we've talked about. However, the hook for me is I've actually started a story in this similar vein, and I haven't been able to finish it because I don't know exactly where I need to go with it. So that's your difficulty. So it's a really good hook, but it's difficult to take it from there. So think really hard about your story. Try rewriting this in first person just to kind of you get a better feel, or maybe you've already done that, but go back and do it again so that you can kind of think about it. Go watch some documentaries. There's some good documentaries on suicide. There's some good websites that talk about suicide statistics, why people do it, etc. Go do a little research on that to kind of help you get in this person's point of view. And if it's influence, some outside influence, you perhaps need to hint at that a little bit better on this first page as you rewrite. So that's my vote.
All right, did we get it right? Leave some comments below telling us what you think of our evaluation on this first page. And subscribe.
Mm-hmm. And please, if this pushes you towards harming yourself, we admit no personal intent in this. Please call us up and we'll be happy to give you a hug.
Yeah.
So
Virtual hugs.
A virtual
Yes.
hug.
For
All
Johnny
right.
or anyone else.
or
That's
anyone
right.
else.
All right, until next time, get ready.
Get set.
Right.
All right, I hope you enjoyed the episode. And don't forget that we have a new sponsor this year. Our friend Ben Grange with Writers Clearinghouse is offering all the prize support for this year. And the winner each month will get a first 10-page manuscript evaluation for free.
Yep, and then the winner of the full year is going to get a full manuscript critique
Wow.
from agents and editors, guys. These are top guys.
That have worked in the industry and really know their stuff. I mean, that's big. Okay, and then you can find out more about Ben Grange and the Writers Clearinghouse at www.writersch, as in clearinghouse, writersclearinghouse.com.